Good afternoon, colleagues. Let's get started. Thank you for joining this workshop on learning. The topic is learning through games and introducing the Growledge Farm. I see many familiar faces, so I think I don't need to introduce myself in detail. So I'm Jason. I'm from the Department of Counseling and Psychology, and I'm also the AAVP in Teaching and Learning Development, in charge of the Teaching and Learning Development Office. So sometimes I will work with different departments to develop some technology and label the teaching courseware. And so if you have paid attention to the title, I mean the announcement, you may notice that I have changed the titles a little bit, the topic a little bit. So the original topic is learning through digital games, introducing the Growledge Farm, but I made some minor changes to the topic to change it to learning through games only, because I think that after a second thought, I think that the keyword here today should be game instead of digital. So because although the examples that I will share today is mainly about digital games, I think the key principles, I mean the keywords here should be games, because sometimes games can be implemented via digital or non-digital means. So sometimes non-digital games can be equally effective if we carefully design it. So I make some minor refinement of the topic to make it like learning through games, introducing the Growledge Farm. So what is Growledge Farm? So this is a new term, I think, because this is a term created by us. So this is actually a mobile educational game that we create by the Teaching and Learning Development Office. The purpose is to serve as a general gamified learning platform that can be used in different courses and for different subjects. And one of the major purpose of today's workshop is to introduce these game apps. Okay. So this is the agenda for today's workshop. First of all, I will introduce some basic concepts of gamification, game-based learning, etc. So basically, I will focus on clarifying some terminologies that we often talk about when we use game elements in teaching. And then we will talk about some examples of game-based learning in Xuyan universities. So our colleagues, so you can see two technicians here. One is Mohsin, who is the game developer in the Teaching and Learning Development Office, and Alice is the graphic designer of our office. And then they will help to demonstrate some of the education games that we developed in Xuyan universities. So here I will show you some examples that we use in Xuyan instead of some other examples, because these examples are designed based on the subjects and courses in Xuyan. And then actually, this is something that we can develop within our capacities. So now if I share with you some examples, some of the games that is developed using like $1 million of cost, and then it is not very meaningful because we cannot do it in our universities, right? So now I would like to share with you some examples that we have been using within our colleagues. And finally, we introduce the Growledge Farm. So before we start to talk about the basic concepts in gamification, game-based learning, let's do a mini survey. So this survey is mainly about your perception of games and using games in teaching and learning and your experience. So some very simple questions to understand our experience of using games in teaching. So you can scan the QR code, and then the session number is H1410. So you scan the QR code and then enter the session number, then you should be able to see the questions. Some very simple, straightforward questions about your experiences of playing games, either digital or non-digital, and whether you have used games or any game elements in your teaching before, and whether you believe that game elements can enhance learning. Let's take a look at the results of this mini survey. The first question is very straightforward. Do you play games, including digital and non-digital games? So 16 of us said that we have played games before, and 3 of us said that we never play any games, no matter digital or non-digital. So okay, okay, this one. Have you ever incorporated games or game elements in your teaching? So actually, 8 of us said that we have ever incorporated game elements or games in our teaching, while 11 of us said that we have never do that before. Okay, the third question, do you think games or game elements can enhance learning? This is actually out of my expectation. All of us think that games can enhance learning. Okay, finally, which three words come to mind when you think of games? So motivating, fun, competition, relaxing, fun, exciting, challenging, strategic, playful, engagement, active. So all positive words. Okay, this is actually out of my expectation because at the beginning, I also thought about how to persuade you that games have some positive influence on like the learning process or learning outcomes. But it seems that I can skip the first part, right? All of you are convinced that the game elements can enhance teaching and learning. But since I have prepared some slides, so I have to say it anyway. So personally, I think that if properly designed, games can enhance learning processes and learning outcomes. So this perception actually came from my early experience when I was still a secondary school student, when I was studying Chinese history in Form 6 and Form 7. So any of you have taken A-level examination in Chinese history before? No? Okay, Gin is very honest, right? So we both took A-level examinations. So at that time, actually, it is a very tedious subject, Chinese history. So there is one specific theme which is about the civil service system in ancient Chinese government. 科舉試 something like that，即係講啲人點樣升官嘅。So we need to remember a lot of terminologies and then a lot of tedious details of those civil service system. So it is a very troublesome subject for us. But at that time, suddenly in one of the classes, my Chinese history teachers, so he suddenly asked us to play a game called promotion chess. This is my own translation. I don't know how to properly translate it. In Chinese, it is 升官棋. So what is this game about? So it is just like a board game, something like this. And then what we did is that we roll a roll a dice, and then we move across the checkerboard based on the number rolled, just like many other chess. And then actually in this game, we play the role of a civil servant in the ancient Chinese government. We start at the lowest rank, and then based on the dice we rolled, based on the number we get, we earn promotions and change departments as you progress. So through this game, I find the fun of like learning all these like terminologies and civil service system, and it really enhanced my understanding of the ancient Chinese civil service system. So this is the first time I experienced the benefits of using a game to enhance learning. So, and this is actually not a very fancy digital game. This is just a non-digital board game, right? But of course you can imagine, right, as a student. So when we are like listening to the teachers, repeating all those terminologies, suddenly you can play some chess, some board game, then you will feel that it is very fun and it enhances your learning. So why games? So why we find that in the literature, like from education perspective, why we say that using games can enhance teaching and learning? So first of all, so this is some basic observation. You never need to force a student to play games, right? So you need to force them to study. You need to persuade them to study. But sometimes it is not necessary for you to force a student to play a games. So when students play games, when children play games, you will notice a lot of characteristics that they display, some of the behaviors that they display. For example, they are naturally highly motivated, and then they practice and improve their skills through repetition. So they will practice automatically. You don't need to ask them to do the practice. And they often seek out reference materials on their own. So I can tell you that actually, my initial idea for my PhD thesis is students' learning motivation, self-regulated learning in language. So at that time, my PhD thesis idea is to examine different strategies to enhance students' self-regulated learning in language, in second language. So at that time, after a few pilot tests, I almost gave up because I tried many different self-regulated learning strategies that is well documented and well supported in the literature, in the real classroom, and basically no effect at all. And suddenly, I realized that one of my participants self-learned Japanese. So he can read and speak Japanese simply because he played a Japanese RPG game. I remember it's called Final Fantasy, something like that. He said, I find a lot of materials to learn how to actually he can read all those Japanese words on the games. So I find it very amazing, right? Because of the power and motivating elements of the games, he exhibits a high level of self-regulated learning. So they seek out references, materials on their own. They show deep engagement and focused attention. They voluntarily participate, driven by their own interests. This is something that we want to see in our students when they do their study, right? When they study, you can imagine if we can see these characteristics or symptoms of students when they are studying, they're like, I don't know, their major, like history, economics, psychology. I bet that they can get at least second upper honor, if not first class honor, right? So this is what we want to see. So we want to see what is the magic in games that we can extract and apply in the learning context so that we can make our learning tasks as motivating as the commercial games. So by the way, so this is a picture that I create using ChatGPT. So I find it very powerful, just some sidetrack. So I just give this very simple prompt. Can you create a cartoon picture showing students playing digital games with fun versus students studying hard and look distressed? And then it gives me these pictures. I find it very amazing. So why games? So people like games. And then actually in a lot of research in the educational psychology, we find that game and gamified learning elements is a powerful tool to enhance learning process like persistence, engagement, and more importantly, self-regulated learning. And also, many studies show that it enhanced the learning outcomes, like the performance in different tasks, the grades, and the participation rate, etc. And another benefit of using game for teaching is that it can simulate scenarios and environments that are difficult to access in real-world classrooms. For example, in a game, you can visit the ancient China to play the role of a civil servant and then to experience different tasks and challenges. And then through this process, you can learn more about the system, something like that. So you can simulate different scenarios that is very difficult to replicate in a real-world classroom. So these are some of the benefits. So think about that. There are like a lot of very popular games. You can see that we sometimes say that our students are getting addicted, or even ourselves. I know that some of our colleagues are getting addicted to this game, Pokemon Go. So you can see that many of us human beings are getting addicted to these like different kinds of like digital games, right? So what we think is that if we can extract some of the techniques, some of the elements that motivate the players in these games and apply it to our learning context, we may make our learning tasks more fun and more engaging. So before we move on to talk, to show you some examples of game-based learning in our universities, so I would like to clarify some terminologies. Some of you may be familiar with that, and some of you may have heard about these terminologies before. Sometimes they can be very confusing. So when we talk about using games to teach, we often mentioned gamification. So you have heard about this, right? So sometimes we use another term called game-based learning. Actually, these are two similar but different stuff. So for gamification, it means that we introduce game-like elements into traditionally long gaming tasks, contests to make them more fun and engaging. So it is not a game. So the learning content and the learning task is still the same, but you use some gamified elements to make it more fun and engaging. For example, you use points and leaderboards and competition and reward system and incorporate these elements in your learning task. So later I will show you some real life examples of it. And then for game-based learning, it means that you actually use a game to achieve the learning outcomes. For example, you use Minecraft to encourage creative writing, or you use Mario Kart and other very popular games to teach students how to calculate means, mode, and median. So these are two different ideas. Gamification is that you use some techniques that people usually use in games and incorporate them in your teaching task. But game-based learning basically means you create a game to achieve the learning outcomes. So another term that we often mention when we talk about using game to teach is serious games. But actually, I don't like this terminology because it sounds a little bit self-contradictory to me. So serious game means that the game is very serious, right? But if you use game to teach, basically we want to make it fun. It seems that these two are not very compatible. But why we use the terms serious game? Basically, it is talking about to use games to achieve some serious purpose. And then it involves some educational content. For example, if you use a game to teach social emotional learning, then it involves educational content for a serious purpose, right? Not only for entertainment, but you want to enhance people's understandings of social emotional skills. So this is a serious purpose. And then you use a game to achieve this goal. Sometimes we call it serious game. So a serious game actually is commonly used, for example, in medical setting, in psychology. So for example, they use serious games to enhance children's adherence to the medical procedures. So this is something that we research in the literature. So finally, digital games versus non-digital games. So this is something that I mentioned at the beginning. So when we talk about game, usually we will think of digital games, something like this. So this is something that we are going to show you a little bit later in the Department of Counseling and Psychology. We designed a EEG lab simulation game to help our students to get familiar with the procedures of using EEG device in a sleep research. So this is a digital game. Usually, digital game is more enhanced by more complicated animations, graphic design. And then usually, if you properly design it, those graphic elements, visual elements can make it more engaging. But sometimes we can also use non-digital games to enhance the learning outcomes. For example, this is something that I will use in my course on social psychology. So in my course on social psychology, there is usually a lecture on close relationship, mating. We talk about attraction. So that at this point of time, when I want to introduce a theory called matching theory, so the theory is very simple. You simply say that so people will usually be attracted to those who have a similar level of attractiveness as themselves. So they will match with each other's attractiveness. Then at this point of time, to illustrate this concept and this theory, I will play a mating game. So I will simply use a card, use some cards, number cards, and then ask students to place it in their forehead. And then I tell them that it represents your mate value. So if you get a higher number, it means that you are more attractive in the mating market. So the competition here is that you need to find someone who is having a high attractiveness, as high as possible. So if you can find a very attractive partner, then you will win the game. So at the end, usually the outcome is that they will find someone who is similar to them. So this is called the mating game. It is not digital at all. So, but students can learn a little bit more about the theory, and then we can explain to them why will this happen through the game process. And then this is non-digital, no digital device and no digital graphics at all. But it is still an example of using game elements to support teaching. So as what I said, the core questions that we ask is, can we extract some motivation elements, or the tricks that has been used in games and apply them to our teaching and learning? So in the literature, when we talk about gamification techniques, there are a number of gamification techniques that we extract from some very popular commercial games. For example, this is the most simple one, points and rewards. It means that users can earn points for the task completion. So if they perform the task well, you give them some points. And then usually it is combined with leaderboards. It means that when they get points, then they can show their points earned on a public ranking system that display top performers based on points or achievements. So sometimes we will have levels and progression. It means that they can advance to a higher level of task or unlock new content when they complete a certain task. So these are some elements that we usually see in commercial game. So the question is, are they really useful or effective? So personally, I have experienced some of these techniques in my classes before. And this is an example of using points, leaderboards, and badges in a personality psychology course some times ago. So almost 10 years ago, when I was still teaching in CUHK. So at that time, I need to teach a course, undergraduate courses about personality psychology. And then at the beginning, the original course design is that I will have 10 weekly revision quizzes for my students. So every time before they attend each class, they will complete a quiz. And then the quiz will be about the content that I taught in the previous class. And for completing each quizzes, then they will get 10 points, and which is equivalent to 1% of participation mass. So this is the original design. And later, I worked with the Teaching and Learning Office in CUHK to make it a little bit gamified. So what we did is that scores on these quizzes will be recorded and put on a leadership board. They help me to create a digital one. So when they finish the quiz, then they can show their scores on the digital leadership board. And then the top 5 scholars in the leadership board will get some extra reward. So if the scores on all these quizzes are in the top 5 performance, then you will get 1 extra point on attendance. And best scorer of each quiz will get a badge, digital badge. For example, if the quiz is about Freudian theory, any of you study psychology here. So in personality psychology, for each class, we'll introduce 1 theory, right? Freudian theory, Rogerian theory. And then if you are the best scorer of each quiz, you will get a badge that you can put on your learning management system. So something like this. So actually the quiz content is the same. Okay, the assessment task basically is the same. The teaching content is also the same. So, but we just add some small tricks into this assessment task. And then we also did some research and really found that students perceived the enjoyment and engagement in this task increase after this small modification of the task. So you can see that it is not a very big change to the course, right? Not a very big change. I did not create a new digital games. I did not use a lot of expensive device, but just small tricks. And then students reported interest and engagement actually increased quite a lot. So as a researcher, this is the question that we must ask. Are they really effective? So what I shared was just my personal experience, right? So we also need to look at like the whole research findings, because actually in the literature, there are some debates about the effectiveness of gamification or game-based learning. So some of them use the term called quantification to describe gamification. So you just say that you will give students some points and then nothing more. Are they really effective? So is this kind of small modification really effective overall? So I also tried to do some literature review. When I look at the meta-analysis, it means that a review of existing quantitative findings. So what we find is that, for example, in this literature review, they reviewed 18 studies that examined the effect of gamification, like points and rewards, levels and progression, something that I mentioned earlier, on students' engagement. So whether these kind of tricks or techniques really enhance the students' perceived engagement in the task. And these studies, all of them use randomized experimental design. It means that they have a intervention groups that that implements the gamification techniques to teach the same content, and then another control group that do not use these gamification techniques. What they find is a statistically significant gamification effect, which is actually the effect size is not very small. It still reach 0.48. And when we look at performance, so another meta-analysis also found that gamification has added 7.2 positive value to academic achievement. It means the score, the grade, according to 45 experimental results involving 3,487 students. So all this evidence in the literature show that on average, gamification techniques can enhance students' engagement and performance. But of course, one size does not fit all, right? What we observe here is an overall average effect. But if you want your gamification intervention or like your gamification exercise really effective, you need to design it very carefully so that it can match with your course content. But overall in the literature, when you look at all of the studies, the average effect seems to tell us that there is a positive effect of gamification techniques. And some of you may ask whether gamification or game-based learning only useful, is only effective, like among younger students. They like games, right? Children like games. But adults, for like university students, are they still effective? But when you look at the detail of this meta-analysis, what they find is that university students, research conduct in the university setting actually show an equally significant effect as compared to studies conducted in primary schools, secondary schools, or high schools. Okay, actually, I should have skipped those parts because all of you are convinced that gamification can increase learning. So at the beginning, I prepared the first parts to convince you. But since I have prepared anyway, so I just go for it very quickly. And now I would like to show you some examples. So if we are talking about like, if we are convinced that game-based learning can enhance learning, so how can we do it? So actually, in our universities, a lot of colleagues, a lot of teachers have been using different kinds of games to support their teaching and learning. And especially in these few years, many of them collaborate with the Teaching and Learning Development Office. And we actually document some of these showcased in our Teaching and Learning newsletter. And you can see in the newsletter we just distribute to you. And so now I would like to show you 3 of these examples. And comments are also welcome. So these games have already been implemented in some of our classes, and we would also like to invite some of you to try some these games if you are interested. So the first game that we designed for a counseling psychology course is called a VR perspective taking game. So the target is our counseling students. So what is the purpose of designing this game? One of the core skills that we want to develop in our counseling psychology students is about empathy, right? So that we want them to have some perspective taking. But it is often difficult because for perspective taking, it means that you need to see the same scenario from different perspectives. So to facilitate this process and to facilitate the discussion on this issue, so we have designed a game with some counseling psychology teachers. So this game basically is to engage counseling students in role-playing scenarios, something that we have been doing for a long period of time, right? In our classes, we do role-play a lot. And then what we want to do is to use VR technology and use some game features to facilitate this perspective taking. So that in this game, we will show a school bullying scenario. And then students will role play different perspectives. We'll take different perspectives of victims, transgressor, and bystander in these games so that they can look at the same situation via different perspectives. So what we want to achieve is that we enable students to understand more various perspectives involved in this situation. We are developing more different contents, but this one focused on bullying in school. So perhaps Alice can try to demonstrate. And who would like to try this game? You can be the bully, or you can be the victim, or you can be the bystander, because we designed 3 different perspectives. Anyone? Okay, Casey, thank you. You want to be the bully, right? Or the victim? And we can also project the game scenes to the screen, right?再前啲要，再前啲。So let's be patient. Casey is learning how to be a student and a bully now. So we are now giving the briefing for this game, some basic instruction.經常喺學校欺負同學。Very difficult to be a bully, okay? How can you do this? And after all these scenarios, I think that the teachers will do some debriefing with the students and engage them in some discussion, like the experience in different scenarios and what you see in different perspectives. 小心，唔會，得唔得啊？誒，咪要，可能你要用嗰個方法。我有啦，隻手出翻嚟。We show 有冇啦？哦，好啦，咁我哋去到呢度。本身要你俾人恰一次嘅，不過算啦。So in this VR game, basically what we did is that we create the same scenarios, but look at it from 3 different perspectives. And what you see is from the perspective of the bully. And then the students actually will go through 3 rounds. One is the perspective of bully. How was your experience, Casey? Exciting. Yes. Very fun. Very fun to bully others. I hope you don't develop this habit. Rebecca is next to you. Don't do that. But actually, you should finish the whole process so that you can understand different perspectives. Now you only understand the bully perspective. It may have some side effects on your personal development. So, yeah, I think it's okay. Thank you, Alice. So this is one of the games that we developed to facilitate the discussion on perspective taking. And we also use it in a course about aggressive behaviors. So to explain and discuss with the students, like what is the rationale and what is the different theories that explain aggressive behaviors. And actually, we are now developing a second phase of these perspective taking games involving more different scenarios. So actually, for this game, we first start with a discussion with our teachers, like what is your need in your teaching? And then they said perspective taking actually is quite difficult to teach and see and to explain in the real classroom. So it is easy to talk about the definition, but students usually don't have much experience about like this kind of don't have much feelings about this kind of scenes. So that we develop this game to facilitate the learning process. And of course, you can see that there are lots of limitations. If you need to use a VR headset and like the device in the teaching, because you can imagine if like 20 students are using the same device in your class, it will be quite difficult to manage. So sometimes we'll also provide support to our teachers. If they really use this kind of device in their classroom, we'll provide some technical support to them in their class. So this is one of the examples that is used in our used by our colleagues. So another example is a EEG lab simulation game. As what I said before, one of the advantages of using game to teach is that we can simulate different situations that is very difficult to replicate in real world setting. So one recent product that we have developed is a EEG lab simulation game. So in the Department of Psychology, we have a high intensity EEG lab. So the device is used to scan some brain wave, to record some brain wave during different activities. So in this lab, they use it to do some sleep research. So they want to examine the change in brain wave during different stages of sleep. But one of the problems is that when you are thinking about using this device for teaching, or you want to get your students familiar with the procedure of using this kind of device, one of the very obvious limitation is that you have limited availability of the device, right? You only have 1 or 2 sets of this kind of device in the lab. And then usually we need very intensive training before the students are able to use the device. So, and these devices are usually also quite expensive, right? If the students didn't receive sufficient training, you don't dare to let them to touch the device. They will break it, right? They will destroy your device, and then you lose a like $1 million device. So what we did is that because we see these teaching needs, we create a digital game designed for the students to learn the standard procedure of using each device in a sleep research. So the first step is that we did a 3D scanning to recreate the lab in the game. So we do some 3D scanning to recreate the whole laboratories in our games. And then the students, I mean the players, will role play a research assistant and perform different tasks in the lab so that they can get familiar with the procedures. Okay, if they do the task correctly, they will get some positive feedback from the lab director, which is Professor Kelvin Yu. And then, of course, you can imagine if you did the task incorrectly, you did the task wrong, you will get some negative feedback from Kelvin. So you can imagine it can be quite terrible, right? So perhaps Alice can also show us some of the gameplay.死機擺得太耐，你再開講唔到。So this game actually is now used to train the research assistant and some research intern who intend to work in this lab. Okay, if we take time to activate this one, so usually it is like that. When we need to do the demo, then the games will suddenly have some buzz. So, but in normal day, it is okay. So if we take time to activate this one, let's move on to another demo, which is wait a minute, which is an AR card game for,得啦，嗱係咁嘅，通常都冇錯，呢個係咪？你過嚟啊，input panel，OK。So basically, we follow the exact procedures of the lab experiments conducted by Professor Kelvin Yu. And then the participants, the player actually need to follow the procedures and do the task according to the instructions. And then if they perform the task correctly, then they can move on to the next task. 得唔得？我有死機啦。咁我轉得唔得？OK， 好啦，算啦，我買嗰部新電腦俾你啦。OK， 你再試下先。OK， let's see how Okay, so let's move on to another demo first. So that for a GE course, so we have a GE program, and then in the GE course, we have a course on Chinese medicine. Chinese medicine. So one of the difficulties reported by the teacher is that it is very difficult for him to show the real Chinese herbs to his students, right? Because like he do not have all of the Chinese herbs, and some of the Chinese herbs can be quite expensive. So that ginseng, right? You cannot distribute like a lot of ginseng to your students, and then they will broke it. So that what we did is that we work with the teachers, and then we borrow some Chinese herbs, traditional Chinese medicines, and then we develop some 3D models of these Chinese medicines. And then for each Chinese, for each of these 3D models, we make it like 1-to-1 3D model. And then we also put the label about the functions, characteristics, and natures of the Chinese medicine. And then we provide explanations and 3D models and present these Chinese medicine in 3D formats. And then we also create an interactive card game so that the students, the task is that they need to match the clinical symptom cards with the corresponding Chinese medicine cards. So you can see the card here. So you can see the card here. And then when you use the apps to scan the card, you can see the 3D model. So the students will get a set of like Chinese medicine card and a set of like symptoms card. So what their task is to find the correct Chinese medicine to cure the symptoms so that you can try to match the card with the symptom cards with the Chinese medicine cards. So they will have a competition in the class who is the best Chinese medical doctor. So each of them will be given, for example, 10 symptoms, and then they need to search for the correct Chinese herbs to match with the symptoms card. So this is a game that they play in their GE course. Okay, we can pass around the card, right? Oh, 我哋可以。Now with the 3D imaging lab supervised by Agin, then we can create a lot of this kind of like interactive 3D games. 係啊，做過 games。So these games basically are co-developed by our department teaching colleagues and the teaching and learning development office. Usually we start by like a discussion on the teaching needs. So what do they need in their teaching? So what kind of difficulties they face and whether we can use some gamification techniques or digital games to help them to solve the problems or to enhance the learning outcomes. Okay. 係啊，我哋係特登有同事 design 個 graphic 嘅。Yes, we have two graphic designers in our office who help to design the graphics for this kind of games. Yeah. 係啊，個 design 個 face 係要啲。So these are some examples that are really implemented in the courses in our university, so that you can see that it is feasible. But of course, we need to have a lot of discussion. What kind of design, what kind of games you need, and then we also need some time to design the graphic and also to do the programming for the games. And now, I would like to introduce one recent product of our office that is designed for all different kinds of courses. So for the all examples that I showed you before, basically they are designed for one specific subject, right? For example, the AR card for Chinese medicine, it is only used for a course related to Chinese medicine. And then for the VR perspective game, it is mainly used for a course in counseling psychology, right? So to support game-based learning across all disciplines, we have developed a game called Growledge Farm. So this name actually means growing knowledge. So it is a land acquisition game. So a mobile quiz battle game. So I will briefly introduce to you some basic game mechanics of this Growledge Farm apps, and then you can try to like role play a student and engage in one of the demo game that we create. So Growledge Farm actually is a game platform for any courses and subjects. And this is a quiz battle game. It means that students will compete with each other by answering questions. by answering questions. So we utilize some game elements such as leaderboard, virtual currencies, group competition, social sharing, and level and progression, etc. So we make use of different game techniques to see whether we can enhance students' learning interests. So for this Growledge Farm, all teachers, once you register, you can create your own Growledge Farm, which is a piece of land. And then what you can do is that you can ask your students to answer questions from your enrolled course to capture the land. It means that if they answer one question correctly, they can capture one piece of land. And then if they answer more questions, they can grow trees and harvest fruit in this open world farm to compete with their classmates. So yesterday we have sent you the user manual, and if you want to download it again, you can scan this QR code. You can download the user manual of this game. And if you haven't downloaded the Growledge Farm on your mobile phone yet, you can scan the QR code here. If you are using Apple device, you can scan this QR code. If you're using Google Android, then you can scan this QR code. Then you should be able to download the apps on your mobile phone. And this game is programmed by Mohsin, our game programmer in the Teaching and Learning Development Office. So all of you have these apps on your mobile phone, right? So that it is very easy and user friendly. So once you open the apps, you can see login. And then you can click login and enter your email. Then you should be able to get the one-time password. Am I correct, Mohsin? And then, so they don't need one-time password for this. Oh. Okay. So now, if you enroll as a teacher or student, I mean, if you use the email to log in, then you can choose your institution, and then you can pick your course if you're getting enrolled in a course, and then you can pick your role, like admin. So usually you won't serve as an admin because the Teaching and Learning Development Office staff will serve as the admin. And then you can choose either teacher, teaching assistant, or student. So that these are the different interface with different roles. If you're students, you should be able to see this one. Okay, so I just want to briefly explain the game mechanics here. So that as what I said before, students will answer different multiple choice questions to acquire the land. And one thing that is very interesting about this game is that they can only occupy adjacent land. So if you occupy this land, the next step, you can only occupy the land next to your owned land. Okay, this is, adjacent. Yeah, so that you need to play it very strategically. So you can choose a land where there is no occupied land nearby. Then you can expand your map. So there are different levels of plants. So for example, if you first answer a correct questions, then you can occupy a land and you will see a baby plant. And then if you answer one more questions, then it will grow to a young plant. And then later, it will give you some fruit. So this is the mechanics, the levels and progression of your game. And then if you occupy another person's land, right, you will see this symbol. So how can you occupy? How can you steal another student's land? How can you steal another student's land? What you need to do is not to only answer a question correctly. You need to create a new question. So that you need to be a little bit more creative. So that you contribute a new questions to the question bank. So you see that there's another land occupied by another student, but you want to steal it. So what you need to do is that you click on that land and then you create a new questions. And then if the question is approved by your teacher, so if your teachers think that this is a good question, then he or she will approve your question, and then you can occupy another student's land so that they can fight with each other. So there are also some other game mechanics. For example, you can tap the trees to reap the fruits, and then you can tap the land to water the plant, etc., etc. So this is something. And as what we said, there is a leadership board. So that if you score high in this game, you can see your name. The student can see their names on this leadership board. So this is one of the game mechanics that we use to motivate the students to work harder so that they can put themselves on top of the leadership chart. And this game also utilizes virtual currencies and economy so that if you reap some fruit, you can sell in the market so that you can buy and sell the fruit to get some currencies for you to answer more questions. So you can see the land that you occupy on the map. And then, yeah, this is the basic game mechanics. So can you, Motion, can you help them to like try the demo session? Are you trying the demo session? 你已經爆咗四笪地，因為你冇晒水咯。Then you need to wait until your water is refilled. So if you want to seek help, actually, you can click on the feedback and help button. And then you can leave your questions and then our technicians can respond to your questions. So far, are you all playing the same demo game? I remember there are some questions about Xuyan University, like the address of Xuyan, the phone number of Xuyan, how many departments do we have, etc. So if you were teachers, you can actually use this game to create some competition for your students so that you can create one map for each course and you can provide some questions, then they can do the quiz-based competition. So in this session, we have demonstrated a number of course-specific games that we developed with some colleagues in different departments. And then this is a generalized game-based learning platforms that can be used across different courses. So if you need any support to use this, like for example, Growledge Farm in your course, so feel free to let us know. We can discuss with you what kind of technical or pedagogical support we can provide. And another thing is that, so if you have any good ideas of like using gamification or like digital or non-digital games to enhance your teaching, and you need some technical support or you need some discussion with us, feel free to let us know. So that all of those previous like examples that I showed you before will actually start from some initial preliminary discussion. So they tell us about what they need in the course, what difficulties or challenges that they face, and then we start to talk about the solutions. So in case you have some ideas or you face some challenges or difficulties in your teaching and you think that these kind of solution or strategies can help, you can feel free to contact us. And in the teaching and learning newsletter that I distributed to you earlier, it showed some of the some other examples of like different kinds of technology-powered teaching courseware that we have created for different departments. So you can also find some of the examples in our YouTube channel and website. And if no further questions, do you have any questions about the examples that we have showed? Yes.
In your experience, how do you compare this method, for example, Growledge Farm, to conventional quizzes?
I think in general, if we are talking about stimulating students' initial interest, this kind of techniques, this kind of program usually is better because like at the beginning, like they are more interested. But if you want to like stimulate more deeper learning, I think some like further discussion is necessary. I mean, you cannot only throw them this game and then ask them to play the game and that's it. So this is not okay. I mean, if you want to like have some deeper learning, enhance some deeper learning from our students, after the games, you need to have some discussion with them. Yes. I think this is what we did for other game-based learning tasks too. For example, for the perspective-taking games, if you just ask them to play the game and no debriefing, no discussion, then the effect is very limited. They don't know what happens. right? They just know that it is fun, but fun is not the end of our teaching, right? So after stimulating the interest, arousing the interest, what we need is that we need to enhance it to another level. So after getting the attention, then we can have some proper debriefing and discussion so that we can enhance the learning. So, yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think both the so-called traditional methods and these kind of digital games or non-digital games, they work together. So, okay, any further questions? If no, then this is the end of this session. So one of the major purpose is to do some promotion of some of our recently developed products. So if you feel interest in these products and want to use them, feel free to let us know. And if you need any support, you can contact me too. So thank you and have a good afternoon.